It was the greatest digital heist of the 21st century, and it was solved with analog techniques from the 15th century. Is there a field where you think old methods are better than modern ones? In this video, we'll tell the mind-bending story of how a spy used Renaissance art not to hack computers, but to hack the operating system of the human brain. 80 meters below the surface of London, a silence reigned, insulated from the city's noisy heartbeat and its ever-flowing veins. This was the deepest point of the facility known as the Citadel, the subterranean vault that housed MI6's most sensitive data. This place was less a building and more a machine. The air was purified through military-grade filters. The temperature held constant at 18 degrees Celsius, optimal for the delicate silicon brains of the servers. The sound of human voices was absent from the corridors. There was only the constant hum of ventilation and the silent approval of pressure sensors with every step. The Citadel was designed to leave no room for human error. And in its heart, it guarded the United Kingdom's greatest secret, its most precious jewel, Project Nightingale. Nightingale was more than a stealth bomber. It was an AI-driven, radar-invisible, self-learning, and theoretically unstoppable weapon. And its every blueprint, its brain, its soul, was locked away on an air-gapped server in that room, in the heart of the Citadel. To enter this room was to confront a god of modern technology. The door was sensitive to sound, weight, and heat. The room's interior was protected by a network of lasers that changed their pattern every second. And to access the server itself, one had to pass through a series of biometric security layers: fingerprint, voice recognition, and most importantly, the most unbreakable lock, the retinal scan. The vascular map of a staff member's eye was the most unique key in the universe. On that morning, during a routine data integrity check designed to ensure everything was in order, the impossible anomaly was discovered. No alarm sounded, no light flashed. It was just noticed that next to the master file of the Nightingale blueprints, there was a perfect copy of it, and that this copy had been transferred 24 hours earlier to an unknown external device. At first, the technicians believed it had to be a system error. It couldn't have happened. It was physically impossible. But deeper analyses confirmed the terrible truth. Someone had walked into the heart of the Citadel, copied its most protected file, and walked out as silently as they had come. There was not a single forced entry in the digital logs, not a single unauthorized access attempt, not a single byte of data anomaly. In the physical security logs, no one had entered or exited the room that night. This was not just a theft, it was a violation of logic and science. When the news reached the highest levels of MI6, it did not create a shockwave, but a silent terror. And to solve this digital locked room mystery, the agency's sharpest, most logical, and most ruthless cybersecurity expert was called to duty: Anya Sharma. When Anya descended into the Citadel, she ignored the panicked generals and the weeping technicians around her. She did not believe in emotions. She believed in data. For her, this was not a ghost story. It was just a zero-day exploit that had not yet been discovered. If there was no physical breach, she said, her voice as sharp as the cold air of the command center, then our enemy possesses a digital key we cannot even imagine. An algorithm that breaks quantum encryption, or a sleeper virus embedded in the server's own hardware. Hunt the digital ghost. There is no other possibility. And so the greatest digital witch hunt of the 21st century began. For weeks, Anya and her team examined every single line of that server's code, every packet of the network, every circuit of the hardware. But they found nothing.
The ghost had not left behind even the faintest shadow. The investigation had come to a complete dead end. Anya's world, built on logic and data, was shaken for the first time. And at that moment of desperation, one of her technicians showed her an anomaly that was too insignificant to be considered. A single frame from one of the security cameras in the corridor leading to the server room. For just 1/20th of a second, the camera's image was strangely bent, rippled as if one were looking through water for a moment. In the image, there was a faint distorted pattern, like a heat haze, and then everything returned to normal. Everyone agreed that this was a random event, a sensor malfunction, a voltage spike, or even a cosmic ray hitting the sensor. But Anya became fixated on that image, because that image was the only crack in her logical universe, and she decided to follow that crack. The image was sent to dozens of different scientific departments for analysis. Physicists, engineers, data scientists. They all said it was random noise. But one response came from a place they never expected. The Courtauld Institute of Art.
The response was sent by a semi-retired, eccentric art historian specializing in Renaissance optics and perspective, Professor Alastair Finch. When Finch entered the cold and minimalist meeting room at MI6, holding not a tablet, but an old leather-bound book with worn edges, he looked as if he had come from another century. Under the skeptical gazes of Anya and her team, he projected that single-frame glitch image onto the room's giant screen. "This is not a glitch, madam," Finch said, a mischievous twinkle in his eye. "This is art." The professor then projected an image of Hans Holbein's famous painting, The Ambassadors, onto the screen. He pointed to the strange, elongated shape at the bottom of the painting. "This is called anamorphic projection, an optical illusion that looks like a meaningless smudge from a certain angle, but when viewed from the right point, from the right perspective, transforms into a three-dimensional image. Holbein had hidden a skull here. It is a game the artist plays with the viewer's eye." Then he projected complex diagrams from Leonardo da Vinci's sketchbooks, showing how light and shadow could deceive human perception. Da Vinci was not just a painter, he was an engineer of perception. He understood that the human eye is a machine, and like any machine, it can be hacked. And then he laid out his startling theory. Your spy, Daedalus, did not hack your servers. He hacked your cameras and your retinal scanners. He entered the facility physically, but he was carrying a series of devices based on Da Vinci's principles that projected specific, distorted light patterns. These patterns disrupted the reality that your cameras and scanners are programmed to see. He presented them with an impossible perspective that they could not logically process. And what does a machine do when it encounters impossible data? It ignores it. Your digital eyes saw the spy, but their brain did not understand what it was seeing. Daedalus was not invisible. He was simply incomprehensible. A deep silence fell in the meeting room. Anya Sharma's team was looking at this old man as if he were a lunatic, but Anya, for the first time in her life, saw a possibility beyond the numbers. "Prove it," she whispered. They set to work. The modern technology of Anya's team and the historical knowledge of Finch formed a strange but productive partnership. Under Finch's guidance, they mapped out Daedalus's likely route through the facility. They analyzed the position and viewing angle of each camera, each retinal scanner. Then, Finch, based on Da Vinci's codices, calculated what kind of anamorphic pattern would be required to fool each sensor. They loaded these patterns into a computer simulation, and when they ran the simulation, they held their breath.
A virtual human figure walking down the virtual corridor as it passed in front of each security sensor caused a momentary distortion, a ripple, just like in that single frame of footage, and then disappeared from the sensor's view. The figure was there, but also not there. The theory was proven. This was not a cybercrime. It was a crime of perception. Now the hunt began, but the profile they were looking for was no longer that of a hacker. Art history, optics, engineering, and espionage. There could only be a few people in the world who were experts in all four fields. MI6's databases were scanned with this new strange profile, and a name emerged. A former MI6 agent who had been dismissed years ago for his eccentric theories and undisciplined methods, but who was also a brilliant art restoration expert. His code name was Daedalus. They found him in the heart of the Renaissance, in Florence. The final confrontation took place not in a cold server room, but in one of the warm, history-filled halls of the Uffizi Gallery. Daedalus was not there to steal more secrets, but to commune with the works of art, with the souls of the geniuses who had inspired him. As he stood before Botticelli's Venus, he was silently surrounded by Anya and her team. He was not surprised. He confessed everything with pride. He explained how he had used the principles of the great masters, of human genius and creativity, to defeat the cold, predictable, and unimaginative logic of modern machines. This was not a theft, he said, his eyes on the Venus in the painting. It was a proof that the human spirit will always be superior to the most complex machines it creates. Daedalus was arrested that day. The stolen plans for the Nightingale project were recovered before they could reach their next buyer, and Anya Sharma's unshakable world, built on data and absolute logic, was changed forever. She had solved the greatest digital crime of the 21st century using the art theory of the 15th century. In the final scene, months later, Anya is at the National Gallery in London with Professor Finch, standing in front of Holbein's The Ambassadors. They are looking at that strange, elongated skull at the bottom of the painting. "He hacked the machine's brain," Finch said thoughtfully. Anya shook her head. Without taking her eyes off the painting, she whispered, "No, Professor, not its brain. He hacked its eye." Human perception is more fragile than the most advanced security system, and sometimes the key that opens the most complex locks is hidden in the dusty sketchbooks of history. For more stories that explore this incredible intersection of art and science, deception and genius, don't forget to subscribe to Parallel Storylines. See you in the next case file.